Your husband really didn't tell you? You're now the joint owner of millions. Tell me what? But he drives a 20-year-old Ford.
The bank teller looked at my driver's license, then at the debit card, and finally back at me. She repeated the process twice. That was the moment I realized I had not walked into the bank for a simple account question. "Is there a problem?" I asked. She gave me a careful, professional smile. It was the kind of smile people use when they already know the answer to a question, but are trying to decide whether they should say it aloud. "Your husband really didn't tell you." I stared at her. "Tell me what?" 3 days earlier, I had married Daniel Bennett. It was not an extravagant wedding. We had no ballroom, no string quartet, and no towering cake that cost more than my first car. We married on a Friday afternoon at the Wake County Courthouse, surrounded by family and a handful of close friends. Afterward, we ate dinner at a little Italian restaurant in Cary, where the owner brought us free tiramisu and made everyone clap. It was simple, warm, and exactly what I wanted. On Monday morning, Daniel handed me a debit card with my name on it. "Buy whatever you want," he said. I laughed. That is a dangerous sentence. He smiled and kissed my forehead before leaving for work. I might have forgotten about it if I had not noticed that the card showed no bank account information. By lunchtime, curiosity had won. Romance was lovely, but I was 37 years old. I wanted to know which account was paying for it. So there I was, sitting across from a teller who suddenly looked more nervous than I felt. She verified my address, social security number, signature, and several other details. Then she nodded toward her screen. "You are listed as a joint owner," she said. "Good. At least he didn't add some other Claire Bennett." Her smile barely moved. She turned the monitor toward me. I looked at the balance. Then I looked again. At first, I thought I had misunderstood the commas. I leaned closer and counted the digits. Then I counted them a second time. There were millions of dollars in the account. Not the estimated value of a business. Not a retirement projection or a collection of properties. Cash. More money than I could have earned in several lifetimes as a fourth-grade teacher. I slowly sat back. The teller lowered her voice. "I'm guessing this is new information." I gave her a helpless look. "Ma'am, I packed leftover meatloaf for lunch. If I had known about this yesterday, I would at least have brought dessert." She laughed softly, and I was grateful because the alternative was panic. My husband drove a faded 2004 Ford Taurus with a cracked rear bumper and only 3 hubcaps. I had once given him a coupon for tires. He had allowed me to negotiate the tire rotation because I believed money was tight. For almost a year, he had let me split dinner checks. I walked out of the bank, sat in my Honda, and called him. "Hey," Daniel answered. "Daniel." Something in my voice caught his attention. "What happened? What exactly do you mean when you say you work in commercial property?" Silence. It lasted only a second, but it was long enough. "Where are you?" he asked. "Outside the bank." Another pause. "Don't drive. I'm coming." He ended the call before I could answer. The ridiculous part was that, if someone had asked me a year earlier whether Daniel Bennett was wealthy, I would have laughed. He did not look poor. He simply looked ordinary. Ordinary had been exactly what I wanted. By 37, I had not stopped believing in love. I had stopped chasing it. There is a difference. Friends had introduced me to men who were supposedly perfect because they had a steady job, a mortgage, and no visible criminal history. Dating apps were worse. One man described himself as financially independent and then asked me to pay for his ride home. I was not bitter. I was tired. I owned a modest townhouse outside Raleigh, taught 4th grade at a public elementary school, and had friends I trusted. I had finally reached the point where spending Friday night alone did not feel like proof that my life had failed. Then Daniel kept arriving late to school pickup. His daughter, Sophie, was in my class. She was bright, kind, and stubborn in a way I secretly admired. Daniel would rush through the doors looking as if he had apologized to 6 drivers on the way there. "Sorry," he would say. A meeting ran over. Once, out of breath, he added, "I swear I know what time school ends." He always came in that ancient Taurus. It smelled faintly of coffee, crayons, and whatever snack Sophie had dropped under the passenger seat. When anyone asked what he did, he said he worked in commercial property. I imagined leases, maintenance requests, and modest office buildings. I never asked what he earned. Why would I? The first time we truly talked was when Sophie developed a fever at school. Daniel arrived with his tie loosened and fear all over his face. "Is she all right?" "She will be," I said. "She is furious because I told her she can't play soccer tonight." From the nurse's cot, Sophie muttered, "I can still play." Daniel looked at me. "You see what I'm dealing with. I spend 7 hours a day with her. Then you have my condolences." That was Daniel. Quiet, dry, and never performing for attention. He did not ask me out while Sophie was still my student. I respected him for that. He waited until summer, when we happened to meet in a grocery store. He was holding a bag of charcoal and studying 2 bottles of barbecue sauce, as if national security depended on his choice. "Miss Parker," he said, "school is out. You can call me Claire." He looked unexpectedly nervous. "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" I saw a tired single father with an old car, a gentle smile, and no sign of drama. I thought, why not? Coffee became dinner. Dinner became weekends. Daniel forgot flowers but remembered that I hated cilantro. He could prepare exactly 3 decent meals, yet somehow ruined eggs every time. Most importantly, he was a good father. He listened to Sophie. When he made a mistake, he apologized. He never behaved if parenting his own child deserved a medal. About a year later, he proposed. Before the wedding, he told me his family owned commercial real estate and requested a prenuptial agreement. I was not offended. I hired my own attorney and reviewed every important clause. The papers listed ownership shares in family companies, partnerships, land, and commercial buildings. "These are substantial assets," my attorney told me. Substantial is a flexible word. I assumed Daniel was comfortable, perhaps even very comfortable. I did not calculate the value of every company listed in the documents. I was deciding whether to marry him, not evaluating a corporate acquisition. 20 minutes after my call, the old Taurus entered the parking lot. Daniel climbed into the passenger seat of my Honda. He looked exactly like the man I had married 3 days earlier. The same rumpled shirt, the same scratched watch, the same crease between his eyebrows whenever he suspected he was in trouble. I did not say hello. "Start talking." He rested both hands on his knees. "Claire." "Do not begin with my name in that voice. Begin with the account." He took a breath. "It belongs to us. I added you after the wedding. There are millions of dollars in it." "I know." His answer brought sudden clarity. The money was shocking. But it was not the real problem. "You knew," I said, and decided I did not need to know. "That isn't what I thought." "Then what did you think?" He rubbed the edge of his new wedding ring. "I thought I would explain everything after the wedding." "After." He closed his eyes. "I know how that sounds. It sounds as if there was something I deserved to understand before I married you." Daniel finally told me the complete story. His father had founded Bennett Commercial Properties in the late 1970s with a single warehouse near Greensboro. Over the years, the company expanded into medical offices, storage facilities, shopping centers, and industrial properties across North Carolina and Virginia. Daniel now held a controlling interest. He also owned land, private investments, and shares in several partnerships. Then he used the phrase, 8 figures. I stared at him. 8. He nodded. "You let me buy you tires." His expression tightened. "They were good tires." "That is not helping." "I know. You let me split your checks because I thought you were a single father trying to keep everything together." I never said I was struggling. I turned fully toward him. "No. You only watched me believe it." That silenced him. He insisted he had not been testing me. His first marriage, he explained, had turned poisonous around wealth. After the divorce, he moved to a smaller house and stopped discussing money. He wanted Sophie to have a normal childhood. He wanted people to see him before they saw the Bennett name. I understood all of those choices, but privacy is what you keep from strangers. I was his wife. "You gave me access to the money," I said, "before you gave me the truth." "Less," he admitted. We drove home separately. At the kitchen table, I returned the debit card. "Keep it," Daniel said. "The account is not what frightens me. I need to understand what our marriage actually is before I spend $1 from it." He sat down across from me. "We should probably speak to my mother and Vanessa." Margaret was Daniel's elegant, perfectly controlled mother. Vanessa was his sharp-tongued sister. I had met them several times and never felt openly unwelcome, but I had often felt inspected. "Why do they matter?" I asked. Daniel hesitated. My stomach sank. "They knew." He looked down. "Yes, they knew how wealthy you were, and they knew I didn't." "Less," I laughed once without humor. So I was the only person at my own wedding who did not understand the situation. That Sunday, we ate dinner at Margaret's house. Roast chicken, green beans, and potatoes were served in a dining room that looked as if no one had ever spilled a drink there. We survived the meal before Vanessa took a sip of wine and said, "Well, I suppose the secret is out." A secret. Not privacy. Not discretion, secret. Margaret asked whether I intended to continue teaching. "Yes," I said. "For how long?" "For as long as the school continues paying me." Vanessa hid a smile behind her glass. Then the questions came. Would I sell my townhouse? Renovate Daniel's home? Travel more? Stop contributing to retirement? Send Sophie to private school? Finally, I put down my coffee. "Is there something you actually want to ask me?" The room became still. Margaret folded her hands. "Daniel has been through a difficult divorce. I'm sure you understand why we are cautious." "Cautious about what?" Vanessa leaned forward. Circumstances become complicated when significant assets are involved. Are you worried I'm going to steal the shopping centers? Claire, Daniel warned softly. I looked at him. Did your family discuss me before the wedding? His expression shifted just enough to answer. They had concerns, he said. That hurt more than the bank balance. His family had judged me, and Daniel had allowed the trial to proceed without telling me I was the defendant. On the drive home, I asked, did they believe knowing about your money would change me? My mother worries. That is not an answer. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Less. And you did too. I already explained. You explained why you did not tell strangers. You have not explained why you did not trust your fiancé. He flinched. I wasn't testing you, he said. Then why is everyone behaving as if I passed? He had no answer. Over the next few days, we returned to our routines. I taught. Daniel worked. Sophie did homework at the kitchen counter. We made spaghetti and watched movies, both pretending the bank account was not sitting between us. Then I asked for the true story of Daniel's first marriage. His former wife, Melissa, had wanted a larger house, expensive trips, and the lifestyle Daniel had grown up with. They fought over spending, but as Daniel talked, the story became less simple. Margaret had distrusted Melissa from the beginning. Vanessa questioned every purchase. Melissa eventually fought back, and Daniel withdrew. I thought staying neutral would keep the peace, he said. I stopped putting away dishes. You were married, Daniel. There were not 3 equal sides. I know. You were not neutral. You chose the side that required the least courage from you. He went still. Several days later, I saw an old wedding photograph at Margaret's house. She looked young and nervous beside Daniel's father. On the drive home, Daniel casually mentioned that his grandfather had opposed the marriage. Margaret's family had not been wealthy enough. She had spent years proving that she belonged among the Bennets. The irony was almost painful. Soon afterward, Daniel attended a family meeting about trusts, company holdings, and Sophie's inheritance. I was not invited. It will be easier if I go alone, he said. Easier for whom? He did not answer. I did not demand an invitation. I only asked him to notice whether keeping peace with his family required sacrificing me. The following night, I learned that Vanessa had questioned whether I truly knew nothing about Daniel's wealth before marrying him. What did you tell her? I asked. Daniel looked or wouldn't know. Immediately. Silence. Daniel. After a few seconds, I felt something inside me fall quiet. Your sister accused your wife of deceiving you, and you needed time to decide whether she might be right. I was caught off guard. No, you are still measuring me. I went upstairs and packed enough clothes for several days. At the bottom of the staircase, Sophie saw my suitcase. Where are you going? She asked. To Ruth's house. Your dad and I need time to work through something. Her eyes moved between us. Are you coming back? I knelt and hugged her. This is not because of you. I promise. I could not promise more than that. My friend Ruth lived 15 minutes away. She opened the door, looked at my bag, and said, "The guest room is clean. The wine is questionable." She did not interrogate me. That was why we had been friends for 17 years. The next evening, Sophie called. After telling me about school, she became quiet. Am I still your stepdaughter if you don't live here? My heart tightened. Yes, sweetheart. Madison's stepdad moved away, and now she never sees him. I am not disappearing on you. Are you coming home? I stared at the wall. I don't know yet. For the first time, I understood that whatever I decided about Daniel would affect more than Daniel. 3 days later, he came to Ruth's. He wisely brought no flowers. Then he offered to pay off my student loans and replace my aging Honda. You keep trying to solve the only problem we do not have, I said. His shoulders dropped. I don't know what else to do. Tell me the truth before I have to drag it out of you. That day, he finally admitted that he had wanted me to prove I did not care about his money, even if he had never consciously called it a test. He also admitted that, during his first marriage, his silence had protected him, not his wife, his daughter, or the family peace. I chose whichever side asked the least courage from me, he said. For once, he used my own painful words without arguing against them. A few days later, Margaret invited me to lunch. She arrived carrying a leather folder. Inside was a legal proposal. In exchange for a very large payment, I would accept additional limits on any future claim involving Daniel's family assets. I closed the folder. You are offering me money. I am offering certainty. For whom? Margaret's mouth tightened. Eventually, money changes everyone. I remembered her wedding photograph. Did it change you? For 1 second, her polished expression cracked. Then it returned. I took the folder so my attorney could review it, but I did not tell Daniel immediately. I convinced myself that he was already under pressure. Sophie was upset, and revealing Margaret's offer would only cause another explosion. For 2 days, I called my silence protection. Then Ruth found me staring at the folder. "Have you told him?" she asked. "Not yet. You spent weeks furious because Daniel decided what information you needed, and when you needed it. I am aware of the irony. Good. That saves time." I called Daniel. When he read the proposal, anger flashed across his face. He reached for his phone. I stopped him. "She gave it to me 2 days ago." His anger froze. "Why didn't you tell me?" It was a completely fair question. "Because I told myself I was protecting you," I said. "Now I understand how easy it is to make secrecy sound noble." Daniel looked down at the folder. "I'm sorry. So am I. It was the first conversation we had shared since I left in which neither of us tried to win. It did not repair our marriage, but it gave us somewhere honest to begin." Daniel stopped making grand promises. Instead, he made appointments. He began therapy. He told Margaret and Vanessa he would no longer discuss me unless I was present or had agreed to the conversation. When Margaret claimed she was protecting Sophie, Daniel replied that protecting his daughter did not require treating his wife like a future lawsuit. He did not tell me about that conversation to earn praise. That mattered. One evening on Ruth's porch, he said, "I need to admit something. I wanted you if you didn't want my money. I did not say it, and I may not have understood it, but I did. The truth hurt. It also helped. I'm sorry," he said. I believed him, but I was not ready to go home. We started couples counseling. Our therapist, Dr. Feldman, had a habit of remaining silent after we answered a question. If she waited long enough, we usually answered again, this time truthfully. During one session, Daniel said, was trying to protect Claire. Dr. Feldman waited. He sighed. "Fine. I was protecting myself." I smiled. "I like her." "Of course you do," he muttered. I had uncomfortable truths to face as well. I had judged Daniel by his car, clothes, and house. He had allowed my assumptions to stand, but I had still made them. And when Margaret gave me the folder, it took only 48 hours for me to betray the behavior I had condemned. We repaired things slowly. About 3 months after leaving, I packed my belongings at Ruth's. "Are you sure?" she asked. "No." "Good. If you were completely sure, I would worry you had learned nothing." When I entered the house, Sophie flew down the stairs and stopped just short of knocking me over. "You're staying?" "Less." "For real?" She hugged me tightly. Daniel stood behind her and said nothing. This time, he understood that the moment did not need to belong to him. A few weeks later, Sophie was doing homework while I prepared dinner. "Mom, where is?" She stopped, her face turning pink. "I mean Claire." I kept chopping an onion because I could not trust my expression. "Either one is fine." And after a pause, she whispered, "Okay, Mom." I had recovered from seeing millions of dollars on a bank screen more quickly than I recovered from those 2 words. We also rebuilt our financial life. My attorney reviewed everything. Daniel's business interests remained his. Sophie's inheritance was protected. My earnings and retirement savings remained mine. We created a joint household account that we both understood down to the most boring detail. There were no allowances, secret tests, or surprise cards. Our monthly financial meeting is less romantic than I imagined marriage would be, Daniel complained once. "Transparency is very attractive. Please never say that again." Margaret and I did not become best friends. Real healing is rarely that convenient. 6 months later, she stopped by to leave something for Sophie. At the door, she hesitated. "I misjudged you," she said. I waited, but that appeared to be the entire apology. "You did." Her mouth tightened. "You don't make things easy. I teach 4th grade. Easy people make me suspicious." To my surprise, she almost smiled. Then there was the Taurus. That ridiculous car survived the entire crisis. Nearly a year after our wedding, I finally asked Daniel why a man who could buy almost any vehicle kept driving something old enough to vote. He ran his hand across its faded roof. "My father bought it. It was his last everyday car before he became sick." I stopped joking. Sophie remembers him picking her up in it. Daniel continued. "Through the back window, I noticed faint crayon marks near the door. Suddenly, the Taurus looked completely different. It was not financially valuable." "You could have told me," I said. Daniel gave me a wary look. "I'm getting better." "You are." 6 months later, the transmission failed. Daniel returned from the mechanic looking as if he had lost a beloved dog. "You know you can buy another car," I said. "That isn't the point." I began laughing. He frowned. "What?" "No, you understand that sentence." Eventually, he bought a sensible SE and complained about it for months. The original debit card remained in my dresser. One Sunday, Daniel found it while searching for batteries. "You have barely used this." "I buy groceries." "What do you want me to do?" "Order a yacht." "I would settle for you buying something you genuinely want." A month later, I found it at an estate sale, an enormous solid wood dining table, covered in scratches, water rings, and years of wear. Daniel studied it suspiciously. We already own a table. I like this one. He looked at the price and then at me. With everything you could buy, this is what you want. I traced one of the scratches with my fingertips. Apparently, I have a type. His eyes narrowed. I like things that look cheaper than they are, I said. He closed his eyes. You are never going to let the Taurus go, are you? Absolutely not. We bought the table. Sophie did homework there. We celebrated birthdays and Thanksgivings around it. Margaret ate at it many times without once mentioning the scratches, which I considered remarkable personal growth. I am 45 now. When I remember that morning at the bank, the money seems like the least important part. It exposed everything hiding beneath the surface: Daniel's fear, his family's suspicion, my assumptions, and my own ability to justify silence when telling the truth felt inconvenient. Money did not create those problems. It only turned on the lights. Daniel and I are still married. Not because I proved I did not want his wealth. I stopped trying to prove that long ago. And not because Daniel became perfect. He did not. Neither did I. Our marriage survived because he stopped treating trust like a test I had to pass, while he kept the question secret. I learned that independence did not mean refusing everything another person offered. It meant having the freedom to say yes or no without surrendering my dignity. Daniel still asks why I agreed to that first coffee. I always tell him the truth. You asked, and I thought, why not? That is not romantic, he complains. Fine. It was the car. He gives me the same wounded look every time, and I laugh every time. At 37, I had stopped searching for someone to rescue me. Perhaps that was why I could see Daniel for what he was: not a bank account, not a powerful family name, and not a solution to my life. He was simply a tired single father standing beside an embarrassingly old Ford, asking whether I wanted coffee. I said yes before I knew what he had. Later, after I knew exactly what he had, and exactly what he had hidden, I had to decide whether to say yes again. The second yes was the one that truly mattered,